September 17, 2002 saw the American release of the very first Kingdom Hearts title, and on September 17, 2022, it will mark the 20th anniversary of that release. Technically speaking, Kingdom Hearts already turned 20 as of March 28th, but it hasn't set in yet for me personally speaking, because when the day rolled around, I was confused to see so many people talking about how long ago the game came out. I think part of the reason is that I got into Kingdom Hearts 9 years after it hit the scene thanks to the advent of Let's Plays making the title known to me, and despite at first thinking that the premise was pretty dumb, the game captivated my attention from beginning to end, leaving me wanting more, which at the time I didn't realize I activated the monkey's palm. Throughout the years, tons of Kingdom Hearts games have released, and I have certainly gained opinions on most of them. However, one game that's always been held in high regards for me was the original Kingdom Hearts. And you know, it's funny, but KH1 is a very simple game with a lot less going on than a majority of the later titles, and yet throughout the years that simplicity has worked towards its advantage. KH1 does a lot of small things that, when isolated, don't amount to much of anything. However, when they're added together, they make something pretty enjoyable, and thanks to the simple and clean way the narrative was handled, I'd say that KH1 is my ideal Kingdom Hearts game, at least in terms of a general package. Believe you me, I like other Kingdom Hearts games much more than one, but in retrospect, this game has only gotten better with age, and since Kingdom Hearts is now 20, I see no better game to celebrate this occasion than the original title. So strap right in, cause we're diving right into Kingdom Hearts 1. Point 5. Our story begins in the opening cinematic actually, where our protagonist Sora is dreaming about the future as he ends up in a realm known as Dive into the Heart, where after almost getting overrun by mysterious creatures, he wakes up from his dream thanks to a friend's voice. The friend in question is named Kairi, who when Sora comes to tell her about the nightmare he just had, she consoles him by completely ignoring him and calling him a lazy bum for not helping on their project to build the raft. That comment gets the final member of their outfit, man this is gonna be weird, Riku to appear, as he's in actuality the only person gathering materials for their raft, and chides out Kairi for trying to come across as hardworking. With an out-of-nowhere challenge from Kairi to race her friends, they all go on their way to prep for their maiden voyage. With the kids wanting to escape their little island, it's easy to drum up some kind of explanation on why they want to leave, like they were shipwrecked. But as it turns out, it's a lot more complicated than that. According to Riku, Kairi wasn't born in the islands like he and Sora were. Instead, she one day just popped in on the island with no rhyme or reason, which got the gears turning in their heads. The two learn of other worlds out there in the ether from her, and out of a sense of adventure, they want to explore these worlds and see what's in them. For the most part, their project goes swimmingly, aside from a random stranger spouting anime nonsense at Sora that one time. However, the night before they're about to ship off, a storm hits the island, threatening the security of the raft. When Sora gets to the island, he finds those creatures from his dream appear in reality, but unlike the dream, he's unable to damage them with the wooden sword, so he makes a beeline through the place, only to spot Riku staring at a black ball in the sky. Sora tries to ask him if he knows if Kairi's alright, but Riku ignores him, telling him that now is the time to leave as darkness envelops his person. Despite Sora's efforts to reach out to Riku, the darkness separates them, eventually enveloping Sora's vision until a powerful weapon materializes itself in his hand. This is the Keyblade, a hokey looking sword that, as its name implies, doubles as a key alongside a blade, and with its power, Sora is able to tear right through the creatures, finally starting to make a dent in them, but his efforts are too late as his island is devoured. Somewhere else in the verse, Donald Duck, the royal mage, just got wind that his king, Mickey Mouse, up and vanished out of nowhere, leaving behind a letter for him and his royal knight Goofy to find the wielder of the Keyblade and seal the keyhole to each world to prevent the darkness, also known as the Heartless, from finding its heart and devouring it just like they did with Sora's. Thanks to the rules of the universe, Sora would end up in Traverse Town, a place where those who lost their worlds end up, and through traveling around the area, he would eventually run into Donald and Goofy, and after overcoming a legion of Heartless together, they joined forces to seal the keyholes, all the while working towards their own goals, with Sora looking for his friends while Donald and Goofy look for their king. This is where the game opens up, allowing you to travel to a handful of Disney and or original locations in which the trio either take part in the movie the world is based off of, or do their own thing. Now, with Heartless on the prowl, you're going to need to defend yourself from their onslaught, and thankfully there's a surprising amount you can do. The controls of Kingdom Hearts are pretty simple. You can select your attack with the X button, and if you land the attack by continuing to mash the X button, you can perform a combo. The circle button allows you to jump, the square button, when you get the abilities, allows you to block and dodge roll. The triangle button is a general interaction button, in which you can use it to open chests and doors or use it to continue specific combos. The R1 button allows you to lock onto the enemy, and the R2 and L2 buttons allow you to shift your focus from one enemy to the other. Something unique about Kingdom Hearts is that it's an action RPG, and one of the first ones at that, wanting to bridge the old school turn-based combat with the hot real-time action phase that was and still is going on. As a result, Kingdom Hearts has the command menu from said old RPGs at the bottom left of the screen. The reason I said earlier that the X button is to select your attack is because of the command menu, as depending on what command is highlighted, the X button will transform to fit that category. Attack is your basic melee, magic in fact allows you to use magic, item is a kind of support tool to give you more health or MP, the latter of which I'll get more into later, and the final command is your special attack. Now in order to choose what command you use, you have to use the D-pad, which is honestly the biggest problem with the later releases of this game. How it worked in the PS2 version was that you can use the right analog stick to select commands, allowing you to be mobile while cycling through options. However, because the right analog stick became more commonly known for camera controls, that hit the functionality of the controls, as now you have to use a D-pad requiring that you break out the gamer claw, or use your right hand to do it, which is nowhere near as comfortable. Fortunately, the developers did see this as a problem even way back when, so by pressing L1 you can access a shortcut menu and assign whichever item, magic, or special attack to that command. Should be noted that this serves more of a band-aid to the issue more than anything, as if you, let's say, run out of a particular item in combat, you're forced to scroll through the command menu to get what you want. Now, while 3 of the commands are fairly standard, the magic command is a pretty standout section for this and every KH game that comes after it. In Kingdom Hearts 1, the commands are pretty straightforward, providing a handful of single target, AoE, support, and defensive spells to use. Of the magic you can cast, Cure is easily the best spell in the game, as with the later ability called Leaf Bracer, it can heal you and give you invincibility frames when you heal. Of course, there is a limit to this, dictated by the MP bar that surrounds Zora's health. However, until you hit said limit, there's nothing stopping you from hitting Cure every time you come into mortal peril, being a very easy strategy to brute force your way through the game. Although, if you manage to brute force your way to the point where you're out of MP, you're still not in any danger, as thanks to the aforementioned items, you can instantly regain a chunk of MP depending on which item you use. But in the case that you don't have items, you can always use physical attacks to bring your MP back, indicated by the orange line in the MP bar. While it's not fast, in the long run, physical attacks are a lot better, as the orange highlighted bar can act as a second MP bar, giving you way more to play with. I really like how KH1 has you intertwine melee and magic to get you to mix it up in combat. It doesn't help out too terribly much since your melee attack is strong enough to handle most situations the game throws at you, but it's a nice attempt nonetheless. Now, in case doing a mystical attack isn't a big enough draw, Kingdom Hearts has what it calls tech points, where by hitting an enemy with their natural weakness, the game will reward you with experience points on top of the experience you get from defeating an enemy. However, while this is the most common method of getting tech points, it's not the only place where tech points are distributed, as by blocking, parrying, and hitting a boss in a specific location, the game will award you with tech points as well. If I'm gonna be honest, tech points are probably the best mechanic Kingdom Hearts brings to the table, and it is a genuine shame that it never comes back in any game after this. In an action-focused game, the interaction your attacks have with the opponent is literally the appeal of the genre. However, in some games there are interactions that can go easily unexplored because dominant strategy takes over and you unconsciously take out enemy X the same way as enemy Y. But with tech points, the game openly rewards you for experimenting and getting intimate with the enemies and bosses. Heck, for the notes-taking portion of this video, I ended up experimenting a bit and found out that not only could you deflect projectiles from the flame bodies, but you can also redirect them at other Heartless as well. Tech points are just the system that keeps on giving, allowing me to find new and creative ways to deal damage after almost an entire decade of playing the same game. However, what dictates how strong a melee or magic attack will be is the keyblade and what keychain you have equipped to it. How do you get new keychains? Well, after sealing the keyhole to certain worlds, you'll be awarded with that world's keychain that will change the keyblade's outside appearance alongside with the melee and magic strength. Now, outside of a keyblade's range, which is affected by the keychain, there really isn't any standout traits that a keychain gives to a keyblade, so you really can just equip the one with the highest stats and just be fine. Or rather, this would be fine if they didn't nerf the penultimate keyblade in the 1.5 version of the game, Oblivion, which used to have the second highest attack stat in the base game, but for whatever reason it got reduced, and with keyblades having no individual ability to help them stand out, this weapon is practically useless when compared to the rest of your kit. The only reason you'd have to use it would be for aesthetical purposes. which I have done multiple times because Oblivion's design is too cool to pass up. Speaking of differences, there are a handful of things 1.5 does to make itself the definitive version of KH1 to play, such as adding skippable cutscenes, giving the triangle button a use, and running at a smooth 60 frames a second. However, there is one thing 1.5 messes up, and it's with the addition of new Heartless. Short and to the point, these new Heartless are a bunch of gimmick fights that are not only entirely optional, but can easily be missed out. However, once they go active, they can take much longer to fight than the average Heartless. Which, I mean, to be fair, they are version exclusive, so it makes sense that the developers would want you to see them for more than a few seconds, but at least for me, none of their gimmicks were particularly fun to fight, at best being a minor inconvenience, and at worst recreating the feeling of getting zoned out in a fighting game. This being especially so for the Sniper Wilds, who force you to play a game of Metal Gear Solid with KH1 controls, which yes, is as bad as I'm making it sound. On top of that, the actual egregious part about them is that all the new Heartless have item drops that are necessary to unlock the final Keyblade in the game, the Ultima weapon. Alongside the new Heartless, the Ultima weapon is, and for the foreseeable future, will be optional. However, tying the method of getting it to the new Heartless really killed any drive I had towards getting it. Like I said, these new Heartless just don't have gimmicks I like fighting, which to be fair, just fighting them once will give you a sizable amount of materials, but considering how much they slow down the pace of already slow grinding, I'd rather just not mess with them anymore. Although, on the opposite side of things, it does give you more of a reason to revisit worlds, which honestly is pretty worth it. With Kingdom Hearts taking many of its world designs from Disney movies, there is a lot to gain from running around these worlds, specifically getting a fully fleshed out idea of where certain places are located in regards to the world. Now, I'll be blunt, I was more of a fan of Disney's TV shows than I was of their movies, so some of these worlds don't exactly do anything for me, and the ones that I do know don't exactly get a lot to them, like Hook Ship in the Colosseum, which certainly ain't much, but considering how much else is in the game, I can't exactly be mad at it. The one Disney world I do know that was greatly expanded upon, that wasn't 100 Acre Woods, was Deep Jungle, Tarzan's level, and it's kinda hit and miss. Miss because the world is covered in greenery, and if it's your first time through, it can be hard to parse where exactly you need to go, but it's hit because it also has the Jungle Slider minigame, which ain't the most in-depth piece of side content in the game. Actually, it might be now that I think about it. But to a kid who thought watching Tarzan surf on trees was cool and having no means of recreating it outside of this early Flash game that exited my life as quickly as it entered it, this was a really fun way of getting to experience something like this. Now, unfortunately, getting from one world to the next isn't as simple as going down the street, seeing as the worlds are disconnected from one another. So as a result, the trio need a vessel to carry them from point A to point B, and that's where the Gummy Ship comes into play alongside the Gummy Ship sections. The Gummy Ship sections are rail shooters in which you travel along a fixed line, eliminating enemy Heartless ships as well as dodging any of these weird things out here in the verse. You destroy Heartless as well as other objects by pressing and holding the X button, which allows you to auto-fire your shots. And that's it. Now, you can also heavily customize your Gummy Ship by talking to Sid to give you all kinds of weapons, rocket boosters, shields, and so on, but honestly, I don't really care for this stuff. Because they give KH a bit of a stop-and-go feel, I'm not the biggest fan of the Gummy Ship sections in this, and many other Kingdom Hearts games. And while they do get better as the series moves forward, it's not something that I actively look forward to playing, except for the ones in 2, those are pretty fun. As far as the music goes, I gotta say that Kingdom Hearts is certainly unique with all of its tracks. Inspired mostly by the Disney world you explore, Kingdom Hearts has tons of whimsical tracks. While none of them are bad per se, they don't exactly stick in my head for too long, at least in comparison to the orchestral tracks, which are just freaking amazing. In particular, the demo cutscene track titled Opening is incredible. The song itself is a journey with a very calming intro and nice sweeping melodies, and then the cymbals hit, the pitch speeds up, and the song becomes intrepid and confident feeling, which all comes together to create what is possibly the best track I ever heard in a video game. Also, I wanted to mention the Heartless's first battle theme, which is a great piece on its own, but it's not because of how it sounds is why it sticks out so far in my mind. But with that being said, I'm all out of things to talk about gameplay wise, so what do you say we take a small distraction to talk about the direction of certain cutscenes? This is not something I normally talk about, but I feel that how certain cutscenes are handled are such an important factor that give this game specifically a charm that is yet to be replicated in any other Kingdom Hearts game. So despite the oddity of having these super serious Final Fantasy characters running around, Kingdom Hearts embraces its fusion with Disney a lot more by having very cartoony shots, from squash and stretch jokes to Donald having to physically adjust the camera because he's too short to keep an eye level, Kingdom Hearts experiments heavily with how much silliness it can get away with, all the while keeping the general seriousness intact. There is one cutscene that I think best describes this early on, when Sora gets sad that his island got destroyed as he assumes that his friends may have gotten caught in the crossfire, to which Donald tells him not to frown because their boat runs on happy faces, prompting himself and Goofy to smile at Sora. Sora then delivers the doofiest smile he can manage, which gets Donald and Goofy to laugh at him, which confuses Sora. It took me the longest time to figure this out, but Sora was forcing the smile, which is why it looks so weird. But because of Donald and Goofy's laughter, it washed away any and all negative emotions the scene had already built up, and made it a positive scene within a second. The best part about it is that scenes like this don't inhibit the game's ability to tell a story, as certain scenes are allowed to breathe and hold whatever emotion the game is trying to tell. This kind of cutscene direction wouldn't disappear from the series entirely, but it would be scaled back quite a bit from this point onwards, which is for the better, at least considering the direction those games take in terms of their narrative, but I digress. Anyways, now let's get back into the story and wrap that up as well. So after running around in various Disney worlds, each sporting their corresponding movie villain that are actually in contact with one another, Sora would eventually find Riku running around in Traverse Town. Riku immediately tries to assert himself as leader, promising to protect them, only to find out that Sora has no issue standing up for himself, which takes the wind right out of Riku's sail as he suddenly disappears. It's not immediately obvious as to why he vanished, but there is a hint located in the early game of Kingdom Hearts, where on Destiny Islands, during the mandatory race, Sora and Riku have to name their raft, alongside deciding which one of them will get to share the Paopu fruit with Kairi, which when shared guarantees whomever shares it will have their lives intertwined. When Sora wins, he obviously celebrates, but Riku doesn't take too kindly to it, not only retracting his proposal on the Paopu fruit, but also saying that the race was just for the name of a boat, popping Sora's balloon. That one small moment tells quite literally all you need to know about Riku's character, specifically his ego problem. Riku has seen himself as the big brother that everyone else relies on, as evidenced by this one scene in Monstro where Sora flashes back to when they were younger and called Riku for backup when he heard something strange coming from the secret place. As a result, Riku always saw himself as the de facto leader of the gang, which is why when the Heartless came, he didn't listen to Sora, because as the leader, it's his job to stay calm and lead his fearful subordinates ahead no matter how scary the path looks. So when Sora shows his growth, you can imagine just how he feels about his friend. Actually, you don't have to imagine because he outwardly shows it. He immediately starts distancing himself from Sora, making his later appearances antagonistic as he tries to hinder whatever progress Sora makes towards finding Kairi. Riku now views Sora as leaving him behind, as thanks to Maleficent, he sees Donald and Goofy as replacements for himself and Kairi. But the funniest part about this is the one who left his friends behind was Riku, as when darkness came, he peaced out immediately to travel, not paying much attention to his friend who was trying to reach out to him. And now that Sora isn't doing what he expects of him, he views it as a betrayal. This all culminates in Hollow Bastion when Riku encounters Sora and takes the Keyblade, telling Sora that he's its true master and that Sora was just a delivery boy. To add insult to injury, Donald and Goofy end up following Riku too, since their orders were to stick by whoever had the key. Despite losing his greatest weapon and friends, Sora doesn't give up, as he piggybacks on the perpetually angry Behemoth, also known as the Beast, to break into Hollow Bastion. After setting foot into the place, Beast leaves to destroy a Heartless imitating Belle's appearance, leaving a severely underpowered Sora to take on Riku. However, despite the disparity in their current strengths, Sora refuses to give in, saying that his friends are his power, getting Donald and Goofy to come to his side to help him out. But they're not alone, as the Keyblade also comes to Sora's aid, disregarding its master to help out the kid who believes in himself. You know, it took me years to come to this decision, but I really like Sora as the protagonist of this game. In my memories, I remember Sora always being the happy-go-lucky kid no matter the circumstances, and while he does come off as that at times, he certainly feels a wide range of emotions throughout the game's run. The kid goes from despair to uncertainty to betrayal, but despite those emotions, he always tries to move forward and do so with a smile on his face. That's an extremely inspiring characteristic to give him that's done surprisingly well, as in many scenes you can tell that Sora hasn't exactly recovered yet, but he's willing to continue on and help someone else out despite the emotional pain he may be in. After losing to Sora and running into the back room, the creepy old man from earlier in the game appears to tell Riku the reason why the Keyblade is back in Sora's possession, which he states in that moment the weapon viewed Sora's heart as much stronger than his. However, the man has a method for Riku to surpass Sora yet, to dive further into darkness until it consumes him completely. Riku's increased strength is more of a byproduct from diving further into darkness more than anything, as the man's true goal was to have Ansem the Seeker of Darkness enter into his body. Ansem is, or was, the leader of Hollow Bastion, whom led everyone into a state of peace. However, after meeting Mickey one day out of the blue, he got very curious about how travel between other worlds worked and got tangled in the darkness, just like someone else in the story. Ansem would also become the father of many Heartless thanks to his experiments, or rather, the father to the ones with the emblems on them. Thanks to Maleficent's efforts on capturing the Princesses of Heart, Ansem is able to create his own Keyblade that can unlock things instead of closing them. However, despite being in prime position to unlock the final keyhole and open the door to darkness, Ansem is incapable of doing so. The reason being is that because one Princess of Heart, Kairi, was smart enough to hide her heart inside of Sora. This was never properly shown off in the game outside of the cutscene where Destiny Island is destroyed and Kairi flies right through Sora. Upon first viewing, it's easy to assume that Sora is just seeing things and write it off, but as the game keeps going, Sora starts seeing Kairi in a couple different places to which she comments on things that's happening around them, and later on, Sora even gets a flashback to her past in Hollow Bastion. I really dig these kind of cutscenes that don't initially make sense in your first playthrough, but when you go back on your second and third, you can piece things together and go, oh, they were hinting at it this early on? It makes me appreciate how much effort they put into writing this game, and serves as a nice treat for subsequent playthroughs. Anyways, despite Ansem's efforts, he ends up getting smacked around by Sora. However, due to the fact that Kairi would still be unconscious even if they stopped Ansem's plan, Sora decides to use Ansem's Keyblade to release Kairi's heart, giving his own body in the process. As Kairi wakes up, they soon realize that Sora's body isn't the only thing they have to worry about, as not only did that little stun end up completing the final keyhole, but now Ansem has gained so much more control over Riku that his 15-year-old body ends up taking on Ansem's visage. However, Riku still has enough control of his body to halt Ansem, allowing them to escape. On their way out, Kairi stops, saying that she's not going to leave without Sora, allowing a very docile Shadow to catch up to them. Kairi instantly spots it as Sora's Heartless and vows to protect him, and in the process, gives him his body back. I feel that I should take the time to explain what exactly the Princesses of Heart's powers are so I can give everyone a very good understanding of how this all works, and the answer is whatever the plot demands of them. There's really been no solid answers throughout the years, so it's pretty flexible as to what they can do. Regardless, Sora and the gang manage to make their escape, only to have to make a return trip to seal the final keyhole. But just before Sora leaves, Kairi gives him a good luck charm made of Thalassa shells, giving Sora the Oathkeeper Keyblade, which contrasts with the previously mentioned Oblivion, which is not explicitly stated to be, but it's implied to be Riku's Keyblade considering where it's found. After traveling back to Hollow Bastion and sealing the final keyhole, the Final Fantasy characters come to tell Sora that Ansem isn't anywhere near the premises, as he's run off to the end of the world, an amalgamation of the previous worlds we've been running through, although thanks to the Heartless's presence, those worlds started to take a hit, creating this monstrosity. It's not long after rummaging through the world that Sora and the gang would come across the last door, in which they would find Ansem standing on a recreation of Destiny Islands. As Sora approaches, he tries to reach out to Riku's unconscious mind, but Ansem starts monologuing at Sora, saying that his heart is too deep in the darkness to hear him. Ansem then continues on by saying that at some point, every heart will return to darkness, seeing as that's its origin. However, Sora refutes that, saying that on this journey, while he realizes that the heart may be weak, its light will never go out. The two, in essence, start their final fight on this agreement, as it takes him to the heart of all worlds, Kingdom Hearts, where Ansem tries to convince Sora by telling him to use his eyes and see that behind the door is the same darkness that surrounds it, but Sora uses his heart to tell him that behind the door is light, which turns out to be true as Ansem gets annihilated by the stream. Though with that being said, this doesn't exactly mean that Sora was right, as Heartless begin forming on the other side, prompting them to close it. Despite their efforts, the door is too hard for them to close by themselves, but thanks to Riku and Mickey appearing on the other side, they're able to shut the door close and seal its keyhole at the cost of the gold the trio set out for in the first place. But it doesn't end there, as with the door to all other worlds closed, everything goes back to the way it was before all this went down, separating a Sora and Kairi who just got the chance to see each other again, as he promises that one day he'll make it back to her. I don't know what happened, but seeing this scene again is what let everything set in that it's been 9 years. years. I flash back to all the times I had beaten KH1 and how I grew up throughout the years of playing it. Safe to say I wasn't expecting this, but man, I don't think I could have experienced this on a better game. While the combat in Kingdom Hearts is a bit dated, the game itself is held together by its story, which is filled with characters who are surprisingly well written. It's also got hands down the best Disney integration of all Kingdom Hearts games, as in the villains of the movies are actually in league with one another to let the Heartless roam free, which gives the story a very concise feel to it. All in all, despite the years, Kingdom Hearts has aged pretty gracefully. But how did the rest stack up? I don't know, it's been a minute since I played those games. But hey, you can click on this end card here whenever that video is available to know what I think. For now, you can make your way around the channel and see if there's something else that catches your eye. Until then, see you all next time.